Okay, this is crazy. Are humans responsible for cattle mutilations? This is nuts. Get in here. This is Cosmic Road, where I discuss UFOs and the paranormal. Before I get too far into it, please hit like, please subscribe, share on social media, and as I'm going through it, please comment below and let me know what you think. Okay, this is a study from NIDS, which, if you don't know, is the institute formed by Bob Bigelow to investigate Skinwalker Ranch and other paranormal UFO related stuff. And he assembled this team of scientists to investigate all this stuff. And it's really something like out of a Michael Crichton novel. I mean, Michael Crichton always had, this team of experts go to some remote, crazy location, the bottom of the sea, Jurassic Park, wherever, and try to solve some sort of sci-fi situation, right? Some mystery. Well, that's kind of what Bob Bigelow did. With the extra twist that, it wasn't just at Skinwalker Ranch, but it was at other places. And it wasn't just science-based. It was also paranormal and weird stuff. And one of the things they looked at was cattle mutilations. And, it has been a mystery in the UFO community for a long time. It is heavily associated with UFOs. And there's so many weird things about the mutilations themselves that don't seem like they could have been man-made. Hearts, the hearts of the cattle seemed to be transported outside of the fleshy sac that the heart sits in without even a slit in the fleshy sac. I forget the word for it. As if it had just been beamed out of their chest. And all sorts of weird things that just don't seem physically possible with the science that we have. But NIDS found some intriguing stuff when they examined a rash of cases in the 70s. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, here's the actual report. A summary report on a wave of UFO helicopters and animal mutilations in Cascade County, Montana, 1974-77. 75 to 77 was a period of frequent reports of UFO sightings around the United States. It also coincided with peak reports of a phenomenon known as animal mutilation in the community around Great Falls, Montana, was no exception to this nationwide trend. However, two features about Great Falls are of interest with respect to this NIDS report. The first is that Great Falls was and is home to Malmstrom Air Force Base, and its surrounding area was an integral part of the nation's missile launching capability during the Cold War. And it functioned as an important section of the entire Northern Tier early warning system for incoming Soviet missiles. The second atypical feature about Great Falls was an unusually open-minded and energetic sheriff's captain. Captain Keith Wolverton was prepared to go the extra mile in investigating UFOs, animal mutilations, and bizarre happenings in the area. Wolverton's energy and dedication were instrumental in alerting the people of Cascade County and even in nearby Teton County that if they reported UFOs, animal mutilations, or unidentified flying lights, they would not be ridiculed and their reports would not be trivialized. That's a big deal. I wish they would do that now. They're starting to. This unusual openness apparently permeated most of the sheriff's department. Together with a lot of community outreach by Wolverton and his colleagues, this ensured an open and accepting atmosphere in Cascade and Teton counties toward coming forward with reports. Further, according to testimony from local people around Great Falls, an ad hoc team of local veterinarians was assembled by Wolverton. These veterinarians performed full necropsies on many of the mutilated animals in the area, often at no charge in the interest of science and the discovery process. Thus, the investigation by qualified veterinarians who had a background in pathology contributed substantially to the quality of the animal mutilation investigations. It should also be emphasized that the entire staff was allowed by the sheriff to undertake these investigations. Captain Wolverton allowed NIDS full access to his original papers and files. Okay, so I'm not going to read it all. I'll provide the link and you can check it out yourself. But let's just skip to the report, the results. Okay. The authenticity of Captain Wolverton's testimony was checked by interviewing several locals. Yeah, and then we got the spreadsheets, we got the appendix, we got all that kind of stuff. They described some of the UFOs. There's a weird egg-shaped object with arms and an egg-shaped craft the size of a two-story building possessing glowing windows, a hotel-sized object accompanied by 4 smaller lights, and a 300-foot-long object possessing rows of continuous pulsating lights. So there's various UFOs associated with the mutilation phenomenon, and there's also helicopters. And this is interesting. We note that there are 20 separate instances of UFOs and helicopters over flying missile launch points at Malmstrom or being called in from NORAD and being reported to the Cascade Sheriff's Office. Okay, here's what's interesting to me. All veterinarians interviewed verified that the mutilations were not the work of predators, citing the exsanguinations, peculiar cookie-cutter cuts, etc. Veterinarians testified that in some cases, prominent needle marks were found in the animal's jugular veins. Needle marks. Something man-made. Yes. In one case, and this is really, really shocking, really interesting. This is, some of the best evidence we have that's ever been gathered. In one case, when the animal was turned over, a large gauge needle about 2.7 inches long was found underneath the animal. That's huge. So that is clear proof that humans are involved in animal mutilations, in cattle mutilations. That's insane. Yes, so there is the actual needle. That is a man-made object. So that's crazy. Skipping ahead, there are 2 waves of high-frequency animal mutilation days centered on 400 days and 700 days, each followed by a period of moderate frequency centered on 500 days and 800 days. These could represent something seasonal. There is a similar high frequency of helicopter sightings days for the 400-day time period, but none at all for the second animal mutilation wave. That is really interesting. So we've got helicopters and we've got UFOs, and helicopters were involved in one wave. Potentially UFOs were involved in the second. I don't think it actually says. So let's skip ahead. There was some type of event in almost half of the weeks during that period, 83 out of 176, or 47.2%. Further, there was a relationship between mutilations and sightings. Notice that of the 44 weeks in which there was a mutilation discovered, there was a sighting, either a UFO or helicopter, and 27 or 61% of them. But of the 132 weeks with no such discovery, sightings only occurred in 39, or about 30%. Conversely, of the 66 weeks in which there was a sighting, a mutilation occurred in 27 or 41% of them, while in the 110 weeks with no sighting, mutilations occurred in only 17 or 15% of them. This relationship is statistically significant. However, the assumptions for this test are not completely satisfied because the events are not independent of each other. For instance, there may be a series of events continuing for several weeks and then a silent period of several months, but each week is counted as if the presence or absence of events is independent of other weeks. But yeah, this is the really thing that sticks out to me. There was a UFO or a helicopter in 61% of these cases. And the report goes on to talk about how a lot of that there was an effort underway by the government at some point for helicopters to represent themselves as UFOs. They made helicopters look and sound like UFOs. They dampened the noise. They added weird lights. So some of these UFO sightings, not that huge long one, but some of them could very likely have been helicopters. Some of these UFOs that were just weird lights in the sky that people were seeing around these animal mutilations were likely government helicopters. But obviously there were real alien or non-human ships as well. Yeah, here's the pertinent section. NIDS has independently obtained information indicating that for the purposes of special operations deception, helicopters were disguised as UFOs and operated in the 75 to 83 period by at least one United States intelligence agency. These helicopters had highly unusual lights and were designed to fly with the minimum of noise. It is outside the scope of this report to discuss the purpose of these operations. Actually, some information has come up about this issue. It appears that at least one intelligence agency made helicopters look like UFOs to deceive people because these people were UFO watchers and they were too close to military bases and they were afraid they were going to see something they shouldn't see. So they wanted the UFO watchers to see a UFO instead of a secret project. Were these fake UFOs also part of the cattle mutilation phenomenon? Who is to say? Examination of the map in Figure 1 shows the majority of mutilations occurred in close geographical relation to the majority of UFO helicopter reports. The more interesting question is there a temporal correlation between these sets of data? We show in this paper that 58.2% of mutilations occurred 3 days before or after a documented UFO or helicopter sighting around the Great Falls MFB area. NIDS has no data on the extent of underreporting of UFOs in the area during this time period. Whoa, wasn't that crazy? So we've got a large bore needle under one of the cows, and we've got signs of other needles, which seems to indicate human activity as opposed to alien activity on the cattle. And we have signs of helicopters and a majority of these incidents. So what does that mean? Because in my research into alien abductions, occasionally, rarely, but occasionally an abductee will see something involving cattle mutilations. One abductee had her daughter with her when she actually observed the aliens abducting a cow and exsanguinating it and draining all the blood from it. And she actually took that as a threat to her daughter. She was afraid that was some sort of threat the aliens were giving her. Like, if we can do this to the cows, we can do this to your daughter. So there's various cases like that. But that is a small number of cases where the abductees have interacted with or witnessed any sort of cattle mutilations. And because there's such a small number of cases, you could say maybe there's some confabulation there. So, who knows? But from the NIDS research, there definitely does seem to be some human interaction or some human involvement with this stuff. This stuff has been going on for many decades, and there's thousands of cases of it. So the likelihood of it being all humans and none of them being caught or witnessed by anybody in all those decades and all those thousands of cases is vanishingly small. Let me turn off my phone. So it almost has to be some sort of inhuman involvement as well. Now, you could say that perhaps it's a blend of the two. Maybe it's the aliens doing something and then the humans doing something, either out of imitation or for the same purposes or for different purposes. Or because there definitely seems to be some interaction between the aliens and people. And when I say aliens, we could just call them the beings, because who knows where they came from. They could be us from the future or the distant past, or they could have always been here. Who knows what they are, but the beings, there are countless alien abductee reports who have been hypnotically regressed, who have seen aliens or the beings working with people, government officials, military people, and that's a large number of accounts, not the small number that have witnessed the cattle mutilations. So that seems to be a real deal, as opposed to the cattle mutilations, where it's such a small number. You could say, hey, maybe that's some confabulation going on. So there really seems to be some there with people working with the beings in the abduction phenomenon. So could humans also be working with the beings in the cattle mutilation phenomenon? I tend to think that yes. I think that is probably what's going on. The same joint operation that is involved with the abduction phenomenon is probably part of what the cattle mutilation phenomenon is, and very likely the cattle mutilation phenomenon is part of the abduction process, whatever that means. There have been some abductees that have theorized and maybe even witnessed that the aliens, the beings, actually subsist or eat or drink whatever the blood of the cows, that they get nourishment from the cows. And there are various accounts of people who have seen, and this is a small number because they keep this hidden in areas of the ships where they don't want people to go, but there have been a few abductees who have seen the beings. These are gray aliens, the grays, whatever they are, getting nourishment through their skin. They dunk in baths and vats of fluid, and they get nourishment through their skin as opposed to eating it or drinking it. So could some of that nourishment come from cow blood? I don't know, but it's a thought. And if the gray aliens were specifically designed and created to work with, to carry out the abduction process, because they're creating hybrids and who knows what else they're doing. They seem to be doing other things as well. There's consciousness displacement that abductees talk about, all various other projects that are ongoing with this operation or operations. So if the grays were developed and created by the, if the lower grays were created by the higher grays, because there seems to be some actual organic, authentic gray aliens that are taller, and then the smaller ones are created beings, whatever that means. You want to call them, living androids or whatever. So if they were created to work with and carry out the abduction process, and they needed cow blood to survive, and then it could be that humans are helping them retrieve that material. So that's just one theory. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. That would be awesome. Please hit like, please subscribe, and if you do subscribe, please hit the bell next to it to be notified of future videos. You don't want to miss a thing. And there's social media links below, Twitter, Facebook. Please follow me on social media, trying to expand the reach of this channel. There's also a PayPal link below if you wanted to support the channel. That'd be awesome. Until next time, Cosmic Road out.